Well, time for my 2014 college football previews to resume. Let's talk about Notre Dame. Fighting Irish, of course, 2 years ago, undefeated regular season, got to the national championship game. But of course, last year, they knew that that target was strictly on their backs, and it showed because they lost 4 ball games, went 9-4. This year, Coach Brian Kelly knows he has another challenge, and that is with personnel, both on the field and with coaching, because he has 2 new coordinators. Offensively, it'll be Michael Denbrock, the old coordinator, is now the head coach at the University of Miami of Ohio in the MAC. So, offensively, something good to look forward to, though, as far as returners. This is a guy that hadn't played in a couple of years. That's the quarterback, Everett Golson, and this is really a relief for Coach Kelly, because unlike their quarterback last year, Tommy Rees, who had a nice arm, Reese was not multidimensional, like we saw with Golson from 2 years ago, who still hasn't lost a game in the regular season as a starter. Golson, incredible arm, but also very athletic. And unlike Reese, when the pressure is in the pocket, has a harder time getting out of it and gets sacked. Golson, not so much that way. He can get out of the pocket, and he can create things just by improvising. He can make something out of nothing, and that will make it hard for defenses to get a read on what Notre Dame's trying to do. So that's a blessing for Denbrock and for Kelly and that Notre Dame offense. And Golson will have weapons around him, including the receiver, that's DeBaris Daniels, and a tight end who's already on the Mackey list, and that is Ben Koyak. But speaking of tight ends, you do lose Troy Nicholas, who, by the way, got picked in the draft, along with another reliable receiver, and that's T.J. Jones. I think that's a big loss for them. Running back wise, you don't have George Atkinson III, the guy who definitely hurt OU last year on that big touchdown run that we saw in that September showdown at South Bend. But Notre Dame will still have plenty of running backs, including their leading rusher from a year ago, Cam McDaniel. He returns. Terry and Folston should get in the mix. And the guy we did not see last year because he wasn't quite adapted to the playbook yet, and also, too, had some serious knee problems. But entering a sophomore year, Greg Bryant could be the best of the bunch. Had a terrific spring game, had nearly 100 yards rushing. They're very high on him. He brings power and speed to that backfield. Offensive line-wise for Notre Dame, 3 starters do come back, so that helps, but you lose 2 of them, and they've had to do some toying with that offensive line, moving the right tackle from last year to the left tackle, and you do lose 2, like I said. One of the guys you lost is going to be a big one because Zach Martin was the only player on this team picked in the first round of this past NFL draft. Zach Martin picked by Dallas. Defensively, again, a coordinator change. Its old one is now head coach at Connecticut. So bring in Brian Van Gorder, who does have familiarity with Brian Kelly, the head coach. They used to coach together a while back. So Van Gorder will have some starters to work with from a year ago, about 5 of them. And we'll talk about a few. Sheldon Day from his defensive line spot brings valuable experience to the mix. Jalen Smith, heck of a linebacker, and a guy I think that will play in the NFL for sure at the corner position, and that is Kavari Russell. And even though they won't have him for very long because he played at the University of Florida because of the transfer rule, I don't think he has much eligibility left, but you'd love to have this guy, and that is the safety, Cody Riggs, and that does fill a big need right there for Notre Dame. Last year, Notre Dame did extremely well when it came to pass defense. I think they were 15th in the country when it came to passing yardage allowed. The rush defense last year for Notre Dame did take a dip. We figured it would because you didn't have Manti Te'o from 2013, and so the defense we knew wasn't going to be quite as sharp. Te'o made that big of a difference. Quarterback sacks was a big plus for Notre Dame last year. I would not expect this area to be as strong this year, and the biggest reason is because you don't have Stephon Tuitt, you don't have Lewis Nix, and those were 2 All-American types from that defensive line spot. You had to double-team those guys. They're not there anymore, so you got at least 6 new starters coming in. So it's going to take time for Notre Dame to gel without those players from last year, but also to adapt to Van Gorder's defensive strategy. So we'll see how Notre Dame will do in that regard. Special teams, don't be surprised if Amir Carlisle, who could get carries as a running back, but also, too, I think he might be their primary guy returning kicks. Kick coverage has to be better for Notre Dame. As far as kicking and punting, looks like it'll be Kyle Brenza who'll handle both. Last year, kicked a 53-yard field goal against Arizona State, and they needed it because that was a pretty tight ball game throughout, in which, in the end, Notre Dame prevailed that game in Arlington. Schedule-wise for Notre Dame, it's tougher than normal, which is saying a lot by Notre Dame standards. Basically, the key games, I'll highlight them real quickly. Michigan at home, second game of the year. Last game they'll play against the Wolverines in that rivalry for quite a while. There's no Michigan State on the schedule, believe it or not, and they usually play them every year, so don't know what's up with that. Stanford is at home later in the year. Stanford probably a slight favorite in that game, but certainly Notre Dame at home doesn't hurt at all. Mid-October, no way on God's green earth they're going to win at Florida State. And the thing I don't like about Notre Dame's schedule is there's only one bye week on it. Only one bye week in between games. At least it's after the Florida State game. They'll need it to get healed up. And you have 5 straight games in the month of November with only 2 of them at home. And even the 2 home games against Northwestern and Louisville are not layups. You got to play at the Desert against Arizona State in the rematch, at USC to close out the season. The other bye week, if you want to get picky, is during the opening week of December when everybody else is playing their conference title games and when the Big 12 is wrapping up the regular season. So as far as the layout of the schedule, the first half's nice because you don't play a true road game on it. For the first 6 games, Purdue and Syracuse, the games that are away from home, are actually going to be in NFL stadiums. The Purdue game's in Indy, and the other game, Syracuse, is at New Jersey at MetLife Stadium. Best case scenario, I've got Notre Dame at 11-1. I don't think they beat Florida State, but those other games are winnable. And then worst case scenario is 7-5 because that schedule, injuries could mount up. And again, with only a bye week, you could have injuries pretty quick and fatigue could set in. Likely scenario, I've got Notre Dame at 9-3 going to a good bowl game. They could make a college football playoff run in 2015 if they get those juniors to come back for their senior year. That's the thing to really watch out for. I think Notre Dame will have a good year. I'm just not so sure they're going to have a great year. That's my look at Notre Dame. We thank you for watching, everybody.